world of Gumball, a show that not only solidified itself into the Hall of Fame when it comes to Cartoon Network classics, but also was one of the most creative of the bunch, with its wacky plots, amazing and relatable characters, mixed match of animation styles, and just downright binge-worthy episodes. It's a show that not only deserves every kind of award that the Earth can give it, but also should be forever noted as one of the best modern cartoons in history, hands down, on Cartoon Network. Unfortunately, the show has since went down the path of most great shows, and has now since bit the dust after the final episode aired earlier this year. Speaking of the last episode that was aired, there's something about it that I'm sure that most people have had a really big issue when it came to how it was executed, and that major issue was the fact that the show pretty much ended on a major cliffhanger. For anyone who hasn't watched the episode yet, I'd recommend that you skip down to the next few paragraphs, as there will be a few spoilers of the final episodes entitled The Inquisition. The main summary of the episode is that a new school supervisor who basically turns everything all on top of its head at the school by restricting various cartoonish activities and the like, basically winds up turning the entire good portion of the students into human-like characters in the process, which in turn causes everybody to practically implode on themselves. And the ending has Rob, one of the main antagonists of the show, fall down into a flashing abyss before the scene cuts out and ends like that. Yeah, again, not a very great way to end off a popular series. Now, there have been a few rumors going around that the episode will continue with the production of the Amazing World of Gumball movie, but that has yet to actually be confirmed by Cartoon Network Studios. So who's to say that the episode that we all wound up getting could possibly be the only thing that we're ever going to see? With that said though, there is a reason as to why this episode was made, and why it ended off as badly as it did. Now, what I'm about to divulge might get me into some kind of legal trouble, and possibly the removal of this article, but honestly, after seeing what the writers and the staff did for the final episode, I think it would only be fair to all of you to really share what was going to be the real final ending of Gumball. However, before I get into the episode in question, I think a little backstory might be in order for you to all get the full effect, as well as the understanding of what this episode was originally going to be. My job was relatively a simple one, given the fact that I had worked for the company Cartoon Network for quite a long time, nearly 10 years of my life. My job was an editor. Well, not so much an editor for the actual episode production itself, but an editor for the writing staff. It's a job that not a whole lot of people really like to talk about in the workforce, due to the implications that it could set off about the writers and staff supposedly not being able to use correct grammar and the like. But like I said, my job was to correct scripts, edit out various lines, and the like that censors wanted out, and lastly to implicitly make suggestions on what could be done to make the episode a little bit better through various pen strokes and the like. It's honestly kind of mundane, but at the same time, really worth it. Now, because people like myself had access to these scripts, we were all made to sign NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, at the beginning of our jobs under penalty of termination, as well as possible criminal prosecution. And heaven forbid you even talk about it with anybody outside of the show that you're working on. Yes, these rules were very strict when it came to how it was all to be handled. With the strictness and the mundane practice of editing scripts and lines, I, as well as many others, got to check out new concepts and episode ideas that nobody else, aside from the production team and others, have been able to get their hands on. Now, one of the major downsides to this job was the fact that each editor was placed in one single show and left there until the show either got cancelled, ended normally, or was fired from their job. If neither three of these happened, rest assured, you'd be stuck having to edit papers for about 8 or 9 hours a day. The few good sides about this job, though, were that we got to read new episodes, and our pay was relatively high per hour, especially for more popular shows in the network. As you can already guess, the main editing position on the Cartoon Network staff that I worked on was working on the show The Amazing World of Gumball, and I honestly couldn't have been placed on a better show. Definitely better than working for the dumbbells at Teen Titans Go, that's for sure. Each script, with a few exceptions, always managed to get a good laugh out of me as I edited them. Some jokes even made me laugh so hard that I had to get out of my cubicle and spend a good few minutes in the break room just to calm myself down. And what made it all better was that there really wasn't much for me to have to edit out, as the writing staff actually had some sense in their heads to correct their work as best as they could. So I not only managed to not have to do a whole lot of work each day, but also getting paid big bucks to pretty much just sit on my butt and browse Reddit or YouTube in my spare time. It was a great gig at the time, up until the start of the end of the series. Well, more along the lines of the actual ending of the show. You see, the script that I had been given the first time around was definitely something that I found to be a much better ending to the show. However, the actual episode in question was something really dark. I mean, it wasn't really censorship worthy, but it definitely crossed the line a few times during the major arc of the story. One thing was for sure certain that when I'd read the script for the first time, it really did have a lot of emotion, love, and effort put into it. In fact, I'd even go so far to say it was probably one of the better episodes of Gumball to date. Unfortunately for me, though, I had to give the script up after a good few days of actually editing the thing to one of the staff of the show. From what I was told by this person, apparently Cartoon Network had heard from the grapevine, one of the more entitled nice guys who worked on the show, about the episode that was originally going to be created, and it didn't exactly sit well with the higher-ups. The episode that I had edited was quickly recalled, and production of another alternate episode, the Inquisition episode you've seen today, was made in its place. Thankfully, though, with as much discreetment as I can give, I actually managed to make a hard copy of the episode's script and keep it hidden away at my house, mostly for my own personal enjoyment. The original name of the final episode in question was entitled as The Rage. The episode would simply start off with the startup logo and intro, as per usual for every Gumball episode. Once the intro would end, the scene would transition over to show the main title of the episode, respectively known as, well, The Rage, in the typical video game-esque like font, before listing off the names of the writers, producers, and staff of the show. Upon completion of the typical introduction, the scene would then transition over to show the simple house of the Wattersons and a daytime outside view. The scenery is rather bright and cheery. This only continues on as the theme of the scene cuts to show Nicole humming to herself as she cracks a few eggs into a frying pan with a few strips of bacon on the side. "Kids, come downstairs, your breakfast is ready," Nicole calls out as she makes her way over towards the kitchen table and scoops out the eggs and bacon onto 3 separate plates. The scene then cuts to show Gumball, Anais, and Darwin all making their way downstairs, fully dressed but at the same time tired and slightly worn out. They all make their way over towards the kitchen table, thank their mothers for their breakfast, and begin to eat. As they do, Nicole then starts to clean out the pan in the sink while asking, "So, what are you kids going to do today since school's out?" "Not really sure. Me and Darwin were probably going to go to the video store and see if they have anything new there. If not, then the comic book store," Gumball replied as he shoveled a forkful of eggs into his mouth. Nicole then turned to face Gumball and then said in a rather serious tone, "You're not going to try and break another disc, are you?" "Of course not, Mrs. Mom. We both learned our lesson about that last time," Darwin said before turning to eye Gumball. "Didn't we?" Gumball starts to sweat a bit at the sudden confrontation, and he simply nods his head yes, to which Darwin smiled and then goes back to eating his breakfast. "Well, now that we know there won't be any funny business today, what are you planning on doing, Anais?" Nicole asked before placing the pan onto the drying rack. "Well, I was planning on budgeting my future savings for college before navigating the possible gross income for the house, followed by balancing and equating the possible tax dollars that's needed to be brought in for the year before concluding our tax returns," Anais answered. Nobody really said anything on what Anais had just said. They simply just stared at her with a hint of surprise and, well, mostly complete and utter confusion. That is, until Gumball raised his finger and grunted before Anais groaned and then explained, in her terms, "I'm trying to see how much I can save so that I can go to college and not have to worry about it when I'm 18. "Oh," everyone including Nicole said as they understood what she had finally said. Soon, everyone wound up finishing up their meals, and then proceeded to clean up their mess. That is, until Gumball looked around at the table, noticing a strange absence of his father. "That's odd," Gumball inquired, which got his younger brother's attention. "What's that?" Darwin asked as he took the plate from Gumball. "I haven't seen Dad anywhere. He's usually here eating his breakfast by now," Gumball said before making his way over towards the kitchen with the others. "Mom, you don't happen to know where Dad is, do you?" Gumball asked his mother. Nicole simply thought about it for a moment before a sudden burst of clarity came over her, and then she answered, "Oh, Yes, that's right. He's at a couple of job interviews at the moment, Nicole answered with a tinge of glee in her voice. Wait, what? Since when did Dad want to get a job? Gumball exclaimed in complete shock. To be honest with you, Gumball, he really didn't want to get a job, but I made him try and find something, Nicole answered. Why'd you do that, Mrs. Mom? Doesn't Mr. Dad have a bunch of housework to do at home? Darwin asked, rather confused. Well, normally he would, but knowing how your father is when it comes to, well, chores, I pretty much decided to get him a job at a local office firm, Nicole answered. It's a good thing that you mentioned that now, Mom. Now I gotta go change everything up again, Anais groaned, before making her way off screen and likely up towards her room. Well, I hope that he does well with the interview. Anyway, me and Darwin are going out now. We'll see you later, Mom. Bye-bye, Gumball said as he took Darwin by the hand and began to lead him out the front door. You kids have fun now. Stay safe and be home before 6 for dinner, Nicole called out, to which Gumball and Darwin agreed before closing the door shut. As the door finally closed, the scene would then fade to black for a few seconds before slowly transitioning to a close-up of a darkened room with a small pulpit-like structure right in the middle of the area. It's completely quiet in the room for a good few moments before the sound of footsteps started to come in from off-screen. This continues for a good few seconds before a large man, covered from head to toe in a long black robe, walks towards the pulpit and speaks. I see that you've all accepted the invitation that I've sent out, didn't you? The hooded man says. The scene then cuts to show the entire darkened room filled to the brim with people cloaked in black robes. Like the figure at the pulpit, everyone simply responds with a mm-hmm, before cutting back to show the single black robed figure in front of the room. Excellent. And knowing this, you all know why you're here, am I correct? The cloaked figure asked again, to which everyone nodded in agreement. Good. Seeing as how we're all bound up against a common enemy, or in this case enemies, I've managed to come up with a way that we can forever rid ourselves of the pest known as the Wattersons for good, the cloaked figure called out. But wait a minute! How are we even gonna do that? Any kinds of attempts that any of us have ever tried making have ultimately ended in failure, one of the robed men asked. The camera then cut to the robed figure in the front, who cackled a bit before saying, While that may be true, I have a way that can easily eliminate them. Just you see. With that, the camera then transitioned over to show both Gumball and Darwin walking down the street, over towards where the Elmore City Mall was at. However, normally there would be various people of various animation styles and the like, practically all over the place. But in this scene, nobody but Gumball and Darwin were there. In fact, the whole scene was so dead that even Gumball and Darwin themselves noticed that. Hey Gumball, isn't it strange that nobody's here? Darwin asked as he and his older brother made their way over towards where the game shop was at. To be honest, with how weird this town is, it's really not that big of a surprise to me, Gumball answered. Still though, normally this place would be filled to the brim with people, especially since school's officially out, Darwin answered, with a confused look still plastered on his face. Gumball, in response to this, simply rolled his eyes and said, Honestly, it's not really that big of a deal, Darwin, Gumball began. Besides, if nobody's here, then that means we get to go to the game store with brand new stuff all to ourselves. And with that, Gumball jumped with joy and then began to speed run all the way over towards the gaming store across the mall as Darwin followed from behind. However, just as Gumball made it to the store, he didn't exactly slow down his pacing in time and wound up smashing his face, rather painfully, into the door. After peeling his face away from the door and blinking a few times, a quick pan shot revealed the rest of the store's entrance, only to find that the entire store was completely and utterly closed. What the what? Why is the game store closed today? They're always open during the weekend, Gumball said, rather upset. Well, Gumball, it's likely that they closed up early today due to nobody showing up at the mall, Darwin answered. It's 11 o'clock in the morning, Darwin, Gumball rebutted. Still though, I mean, look around us, Gumball. Nobody's here today, Darwin said, before the scene cut to show various cuts of the different stores, all completely empty and dark, before cutting right back to the two. Okay, seriously, where the heck is everybody? Gumball yelled out. Not sure, dude, but honestly, I think it's just best to kind of get out of here. We might be trespassing if nobody's here. Who's to say the mall could be closed or something? Darwin answered. Ugh, fine, Gumball said before he and Darwin made their way off screen. As the two continued to walk, Gumball's stomach started to growl. This caught Darwin's attention, and he soon stopped dead in his tracks and said, Dude, how are you hungry again? We just ate breakfast 10 minutes ago. Well, Darwin, when all you've eaten today is a couple of eggs and a little bit of bacon, then there's a very likely chance you're going to get hungry again really soon, Gumball answered. How is... Never mind. I'm sure there's some food at home that we can eat, Darwin said before Gumball stopped him. Darwin, why even bother going home for lunch? We're at the mall, Gumball said, pointing over towards the food court. Gumball, if it isn't already obvious at this point by now, there's nobody at the mall today, Darwin yelled out, which caused Gumball to fall back on the floor in a comedic manner. How do you even know that? Gumball began. We didn't even pass by the food court when we entered the mall yet. Look, dude, I know what I'm saying here. If nobody's at the mall today, then nobody's at the mall, Darwin said, rather annoyed. Gumball then held a slight smirk on his face and he said, $50 says that there at least isn't one person at that food court. $50 says that there isn't anybody there at all. And, if I win, you have to admit that you clogged the toilet last night, Darwin said. Wait, what? That wasn't me, that was Dad, Gumball said defensively. Yeah, sure, no. You were the one that went in there last time, Gumball. Don't deny it, Darwin said as he started to make his way over towards the food court area, to which Gumball followed. The two then proceeded to make their way over towards where the food court was, taking a few glances every so often at the scenery to try and see if anybody was there. After a few seconds, the two wound up making their way into the food court's main area, only for Darwin's face to literally fall to the ground in shock at what he saw. The scene panned out quickly to show the entire food court filled to the brim with people either ordering food, eating, or simply going into one of the shops next to the food court. What? Darwin stuttered. Well, looks like I win the bet, Darwin, Gumball said. This doesn't make any sense. We would have heard them if they were all here. I mean, everything in the mall was dead silence. Where did they all come from? Darwin said, picking up his face and screwing it back onto his head. Well, maybe everybody was busy with something and just had a late start up to the day, Gumball said. Okay, I can believe that, but something in my gut's telling me that something's off about today, Darwin said. Gumball, in response to what Darwin had just said, simply groaned and rolled his eyes. Oh, my gosh, Darwin, Gumball began. Why is it that every time something slightly strange happens, you have the sudden gut feeling that something's wrong? Darwin, now slightly offended by what Gumball had said, glared at the blue cat and asked, I do not think that every time, Darwin said. Gumball simply smiled before pulling out a small remote out of Hammerspace and began to play out a series of various scenes with very similar concepts to them. One scene involved Darwin and Gumball going over towards a lunch lady at their school, who proceeded to slam down some rather gross green slime gunk onto Darwin's plate, to which Darwin proceeded to mention that he had a gut feeling about the food being bad. The scene would then transition to show another scene, this time of Darwin and the rest of the family eating at a restaurant, until a few employees walk up towards the Wattersons singing the happy birthday song in the process, much to the Wattersons' confusion. This in turn causes Darwin to say that there was something suspicious going on and that he had a bad feeling in his gut. And with that, the scene would transition back to show Darwin and Gumball making their way over towards one of the food stands. However, just as Gumball was about to order something, the counter worker slammed down a large metal barrier right in front of his face. What just happened? Gumball said. I don't know, maybe they're closing up for the day? Darwin answered. Whatever, this place stunk anyway, Gumball said as he moved on to another booth. However, as he did just that, without any kind of warning, every single food stand that they went to slammed their metal doors right in their faces. Even Larry's burger joint shut down on them. What the what? Why is everybody shutting down this early? Gumball said. I don't know, but maybe it's just better that we go home. The game store isn't open today, and the restaurants are closing up. It's best if we just kind of go home, Darwin said. I guess you're right, Gumball said before the two made their way out of the room with little said between the two. Upon the two leaving the mall's food court, one of the people there immediately let out a loud whistle which caught everyone's attention. Then, in nearly an instant, everyone started going into various restaurants one by one until the entire area was 100% cleared out, as if nobody was even there to begin with. The scene then cuts to show the Wattersons' house, with Gumball and Darwin making their way inside of the home. As they walk inside, Gumball immediately calls out, "Hey Mom, we're home!" There was a bit of silence for a bit before Gumball said the same thing again. After no response for the third time, Gumball then started to yell out the same thing until Darwin stopped him by sticking a note into his face. The young blue cat immediately took it off of his face and began to read it aloud. "Dear Gumball and Darwin, if by the time you two have already came home, which, knowing how you two tend to be, and when it comes to time, you're very much likely late, but if I'm happen to not be home, I went out with Anais to go and get some groceries at the store, before getting some lunch afterwards. If by any miracle you actually wind up coming home early, there's some leftovers in the fridge for you to heat up for lunch. And please try not to mess up the house. If you do, well, let's just say that you'll have to spend some time hiding from me, as I'll personally make sure of it to eat your souls for a meal. Love, Mom. P.S. Made some cookies for you guys, they're in the fridge." The two shuddered a bit at the last sentence, given how Nicole's threats usually tend to go out, before immediately making their way over towards the kitchen area and getting themselves something to eat. As they eat, the scene then cuts back to show the same room with the robed figures in the front, but this time the room is much more packed, with nearly countless people stuffed into one room, all roped up, and quite literally causing a bit of a scene in there. "Everyone, quiet down, what's the problem?" The leader, as he was called to the group of robed figures, called out, which in turn caused everyone to shut up. There was a bit of silence for a moment before a single robed arm rose up. "Yeah, you in the back," the leader yelled out. "Two of the Wattersons were found in the mall after our first meeting was adjourned. We think they might know what's going on," the man in the back called out. There was pure silence at this point, and row after row of eyes popped out of the hoods in a horrified expression. However, there's the sound of a staff hitting the floor, which causes everyone to immediately turn back to the pulpit and meet the gaze of their leader. "Given the possibility of there might possibly being an issue with our current plans, it's my duty to speed up plans up to tonight, when the moon is at its fullest," the leader said. "And how are we even going to do that? What do we honestly have that we can get rid of those pests for good?" one of the robed men asked in the crowd. "Well, I was going to reveal the machine next week, but given the circumstances..." The lead robed character immediately walked off to the side of the stage and proceeded to pull down a rope, which pulled out a large blanket, revealing a large circular metal contraption with 3 pointed lasers at 3 different angles, all on a larger ring next to the center of it. And on the very, very center of the machine itself, propped up by a large metal slab, was a medium-sized slab of metal with 4 metal latches at both the right and left side of it, likely a device to hold down arms and legs. "This machine is what I like to call the eraser," the leader began. "This device, when charged up, can erase any and all things out of existence in less than 2 seconds flat. Anyone who's blasted by the machine's lasers will forever be removed from existence for all eternity. There is no reverse on this one." Upon completion of the explanation, the rest of the robed individuals immediately began to cheer and yell out compliments out of the leader of the group. The scene then quickly pans over towards the figure, who simply chuckles before saying, "Looks like the Wattersons are going to have a blast tonight." The camera then slowly transitions to black before slowly coming back to show the exterior of the Wattersons' house at night. There isn't much that is shown in this scene, other than a few shots of various parts of the house, the backyard, the front yard, and the right and left side of the home. Then, after that, the camera would then cut to show a few-second clip of each of the Wattersons sleeping in their respective beds, before cutting back to the outside shot again. This time, however, as the scene played out, a few separate shadows would rush from one side of the screen and onto the other. The camera then cut to show the backyard, followed by the sides of the house, with various shadows of people either crawling over the fence or sneaking in through the windows, or basically trying to find one way or another to get into the house. Even one sitting there and actually going down the chimney like Santa Claus to get into it. One pair of these shadows, who had actually managed to get in through one of the windows, slowly began to whisper to each other as they walked into the main living room. "Did you bring the chloroform?" "Yeah, I did." "How are we going to do this?" the shadow asked. "I'll deal with the parents. You go upstairs and you knock the kids out," the other answered. "Will do," the other said. And with that, a variety of different shaped shadow figures began to make their way through the house, with a double-sided shot being shown of two pairs of shadows going into each of the kids' rooms and the parents before swiftly covering their faces with a large cloth. Nicole and Gumball were the only ones who actually struggled a bit in the process, before the two plopped down, completely knocked out. Then, it cuts to show the outside of the house once more, with the front door opening, and all the shadow people walking out of the house with the entire family thrown over their shoulders like a towel. The scene would immediately transition slowly to show Nicole, face up close, still asleep. That is, until Gumball's faint, muffled screams could be heard, which causes Nicole to start stirring a little bit, before her eyes snap open relatively quickly. She immediately gasped as beads of sweat started to pour down her face in a rapid succession. The scene quickly pans out to show Nicole, her arms held together and bound with chains, her feet also in the same manner. She starts to panic and attempts to try and pry herself away from the bonds, but quickly stops at what she's doing as she quickly glances over at the scene right in front of her and freezes. The camera then does an entire 180-degree shot from where Nicole was at to a scene with Gumball, Darwin, Anais, and Richard all strapped down onto the device shown earlier in the episode, duct tape covering each of their mouths, muffling their screams in the process. The group of robed individuals all circled around each device as a protective layer of some sort. The main leader of the group standing in the direct middle of the four machines with the struggling children. The robed individual then proceeded to start making his way over towards where Nicole was at, a soft chuckle coming out of his mouth as he did such. Upon making his way over towards the struggling blue cat, he immediately grabbed at her face, scrunching it up and held it close to his own. "Good morning to you, Nicole. I bet you weren't exactly expecting to wake up in an old junkyard, did you?" the figure said. "Who the heck are you? Why am I here? More importantly, why are my kids and my husband tied down to that thing over there?" Nicole asked with a bit of aggression filling her voice. "Oh, well, you're here because you and your kids have caused more trouble to our little town than we honestly care to admit. And honestly, me and many others in this town are sick of it. So we decided that the best course of action is to rid you and your brats and your fat husband permanently." The figure snapped, before walking away from Nicole in the process. Nicole, in complete and utter shock, stuttered out, "What?" Her voice then started going into a deep and angry tone as she snapped the chains down on the ground in a rage. "You listen to me, buddy. You don't touch my husband, nor do you have any touch my kids. If you so much as do anything to hurt them, so help me, I will make sure of it that every single bone in your body, every organ, every blood vessel in that pathetic little meat suit you called a body feels every ounce of pain." The robed figure simply chuckles, and then proceeds to turn to the blue cat once more and say, "Oh, we know. We are all very capable of knowing what you could possibly do to us. And we know we're taking a great risk. But, at least, in the end, we'll be rid of all of you, and your little brats for good. It's unfortunate that I didn't make a separate machine, otherwise you'd be tied up with them," the robed figure said. "Who the heck are you anyway? And what do you have against me and my family?" Nicole demanded. The robed figure simply lowered his hooded head, and then proceeded to start shaking his head in the process before turning over towards Nicole. "I'm rather disappointed, Nicole. The fact that you can't even recognize someone that you've met many times already. In fact, I'm sure that Gumball's mentioned me plenty of times before. And to make matters even sadder, the fact that you can't even seem to even recognize everybody else here that I'm sure you at least know on an acquaintance level. The hooded figure then proceeded to lower the hood over his head, dropping it to the side of the robe in the process. The camera then cut to show the face of the assailant, being none other than Rob himself, glitchy form and all. The scene then cut to show the other hooded figures lowering their hoods as well, revealing very familiar faces such as Principal Brown, Miss Simeon, Larry, Penny's father and mother, and many, many more. Nicole's face is then shown, her face frozen in a state of shock and horror as each character is revealed. Shocked, I see. Well, to be honest with all of you, you shouldn't be. Every single one of these people here have had to deal with either one or all of your little annoying brat kids' antics that have done more than enough to try and hurt and ruin the lives of so many individuals. For example, Principal Brown and Miss Simeon, a group that were supposed to become a couple in the end, but because of Gumball and his brother's antics and the like, they really don't have much to do with each other anymore. And how about we use me as an example? If it wasn't for that monster Gumball over there, I wouldn't look like the freak that I am today. Rob said, pulling the hood back over his face and signaling the others to put their hoods back on as well. And I'm gonna make sure of it, as well as everybody else, that we get our revenge on them, that we rid ourselves of them permanently. Especially me, Mrs. Watterson. Especially me. The robe figure then procured a small remote with a button on it, and without any hesitation, laughed and pressed the button. When he did this, the scene then panned over to show the device the rest of the Wattersons were on starting to spin around slightly, only on the outside ring of the device, before the three laser-like devices began to glow a variety of different colors, ranging from blue to purple to orange to pink to gray to multiple other colors. Then, with another press of the button, all four of the lasers on the first device, Richard's one, immediately shot out and blasted the large pink rabbit. Richard screamed as a bright white light consumed his entire being before a blast of pink sparks shot out all over the place. And once the smoke and the light faded out, it was revealed that there was nothing left on that table except for the straps that once held Richard to that quiet little table in the middle. The other kids, including Nicole, gasped and were in complete and utter shock. None of them screamed, but later on they attempted to try and get out of their bonds as best as they could. However, with each press of the button that Rob would press, one of the devices would slowly fire up and would do the same thing to another character. The next one being Darwin, and in the other being Anais. Rob, the leader, standing and laughing with the others as the device blasted each of the family with the rays, shattering them into nothing else more but colored sparks, removing them entirely from the face of the earth. However, Gumball, during the whole ordeal, had somehow managed to loosen himself up out of the bonds after a small canister of oil had tapped over after one of the blast and began to drip a lot of oil onto his hands in the machine's restraints, lubricating the bonds in the process. Just as the device was about to blast Gumball, Gumball swiftly escaped from his fate and then began to run towards his mother. The other figures attempted to try and recapture Gumball, but he himself was a bit too slick for them. He managed to dodge any remote kind of attempt and even beat up a few of the people that were trying to take him again, Rob being the last one to attempt to try and get to him again. However, seeing as how nobody was going to be able to get it, Rob immediately looked around and then eyed something completely off screen. The scene then cut back to show Gumball running over towards his mother. Nicole, seeing her son pretty much safe, making his way over towards her, practically snaps the chains off of her arms in a sudden bout of strength, and then proceeds to run over towards her son, the chains falling off of her in the process. The scene then proceeds to slow down just a bit, then shows a side-by-side shot of Gumball and Nicole running towards each other. However, just as they were about to get about a few feet to each other, Gumball's face slowly contorts into one of pain, and his entire body jolts forward in an instant, before he immediately slows down and stops. Nicole's face, once full of joy, was now filled with complete dread as she slowly screamed out Gumball's name. The screen showing Gumball's side of the screen would then immediately pan out more to show Gumball, with an arrow sticking out of his gut, a small amount of cartoony red blood slowly trickling down from the wound. The scene immediately cut to show Rob, bow in hand, smirking as he said, "Bullseye." The scene would cut back to Gumball, who upon touching and looking at the wound, would fall down to his knees, gasping for air, and then immediately falling to his side. However, Nicole was about as quickly as she could, immediately grabbed him before he could even fall to the ground. As Gumball lied there, Nicole just cradled her son, as he completely coughed and sputtered. Mom, Gumball said shakily, panting and slightly freaking out. "It's okay, sweetie. It's okay. Mommy's here," Nicole said, tears starting to flow down her face as she attempted to put pressure onto the wound to stop the bleeding. It hurts. It hurts a lot, Mom," Gumball said weakly, his body shaking in the process. Nicole, seeing as how putting pressure on the wound wasn't doing anything, tried doing whatever she possibly could to keep her son alive, but it didn't work. And with tears in her eyes, she said, "Shh, shh, shh. It's okay, honey. It won't last long. Just relax, Gumball. Just relax, and I promise the pain will go away. Just relax, sweetie. Just relax. Mommy's here with you. I promise." "Shh," Nicole said before singing a soft little lullaby. Of course, her nearly breaking down on the verge of a breakdown. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird. And if that mockingbird don't sing, Mama's gonna buy you a diamond ring." It's then that as she's singing that, the scene would cut to show a small montage of various clips of Nicole, Gumball, and the others together throughout the years. The first one showing Nicole holding a newborn Gumball in her arms. The second showing Gumball taking his first steps towards Nicole and Richard. The third scene showing Gumball's 6th birthday. And then one more showing another variety of scenes through a fast pace of Gumball throughout the show, before cutting to Gumball's arms slowly falling to the side, completely limp as Nicole finished her lullaby. Nicole, as she finished, immediately rubbed her son's head and closed her son's eyes, sobbing all the way as she held her now dead son. That is, however, until her crying turned into growls. She gave her now dead son a soft little kiss on his head, and then carefully laid him down onto the ground in a comfortable position. And with that, she stood up, and then proceeded to look at the robed individuals with rage filling her eyes. Then, without any remote warning, she let out a gut-twisting scream of rage before a bright yellow light enveloped her entire being, nearly forming a sun-like structure that wrapped itself around her, but practically destroyed everything else around her. The robed figures stared up in horror, and soon They all began to panic and run in opposite directions of Nicole. Nicole, seeing this, let out a deep, guttural scream before the large sun-like structure holding Nicole began to blast in different directions, consuming any and all things in its path, including the robed figures. She continued to do this over and over and over again, watching as the sun's or what's assumed to be the sun rays of Nicole's wrath and anger, wrapping themselves around each and every single one of the robed figures, and slowly but surely burning them into nothing more but ashes. She continued to do such over and over again, her rage building up even more, and then she finally got to Rob. She herself looked at him with the full-on hatred, and then, with the rays, wrapped the sun's rays around Rob, eviscerating him entirely off of the face of the earth. Seeing as how all the rest of the people there were gone, well, a good majority of them, as the others had practically hidden or ran off at home, she gave a small little smile, looked over at her son, still lying there on the ground. A tear rolled down her face, and then she whispers, "Mommy's coming home, you guys." And with that, she let out one final scream, which envelopes the entire sun-like structure, which envelopes her body before exploding in a silent blast that wipes out the majority of the city of Elmore and a myriad of scenes. A soft, foreboding, forlorn song playing in the background as it did such, as the entire city of Elwood is completely and utterly leveled like a nuclear bomb blast. And then, once the entire town was completely destroyed, the scene would then cut to black and then end with the final showing of the credits. And that was what was going to be the final episode of The Amazing World of Gumball. Now, again, like I said, pretty good episode for the most part. Dark, but at the same time, really, really enjoyable. Again, as I've said before, I know that I risk my job, and I know that I possibly risk a lot of different things, sitting there and saying whatever it is that I have to say, but again, I have to say that you all ultimately do deserve to know what the true ending of The Amazing World of Gumball really was supposed to be. Sure enough, it was dark, but at the same time, though, when you think about it, it's a million times better than that cliffhanger episode that we wind up getting. But still, regardless of what we might think of it, I think we can all agree that this episode definitely would have been a better ending to the show than what we have now.
In fear and surprise as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave, glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping, horror-driven, nightmarish, gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come at any day.